Hi everyone, welcome to our Norway live session. Today, we're very excited to bring to you another really interesting and very intellectual personality. As young as she looks, she has, and as beautiful as she is, she's beauty with brains talking to us from across the US. And she's very kind to join us today and discuss with us very interesting and a very sort of a topic that has been the talk for the past couple of months since the pandemic. So we have with us Dr. Julie Fratantoni. She is a PhD. She is a cognitive neuroscientist, and she's at the Center of Brain Health at the University of Dallas, Texas. And she's been very kind enough to come on our show and share her expertise, her experiences, her knowledge, and all that she's got. So the topic that we will be discussing today with Dr. Julie is brain health, because that is, of course, what her expertise is. And this is something really interesting to all of us. You quite often you hear of mental health, of course. It's something that we hear about all the time now, but you don't hear about brain health as much. And then when you do hear about brain health, one just kind of equates it with mental health. So we will ask our guest speaker to let us know is there a difference, Dr. Julie, between mental health and brain health? Are they different? Are they similar? Or what is the comparison?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, I just want to say I'm really excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me. And it's always just a joy to get to really talk about what I'm passionate about, which is the brain and how to keep it healthy. And so it's something that I think not enough people are really equipped with. And so yeah, let's talk about the difference between mental health and brain health. So mental health is a term that I think people are more familiar with. And it really is a more narrow focus. So mental health is just focused on someone's well-being, really. And I think also it's been stigmatized to really only be associated with things like depression, anxiety, and stress. And so that's a pretty narrow focus when you think of all of the things that the human brain does for us, which is literally everything in our life. It's the hub for being able to have social interactions and maintain relationships. It's what we need to pay attention and remember things and learn and be strategic or make decisions or problem solve. It is, it's our daily life. It's our responsibilities, our sense of purpose, our sleep, our exercise, our diet. And then, of course, it is mood too. So things like resilience, things like happiness, life satisfaction, and then, of course, depression, anxiety, stress. So I think I like to get people to really embrace this new category, which is brain health. I think it's a more holistic approach to thinking about the brain and all of the things that it does, rather than kind of just shrinking it down to one little silo of well-being. And truly, the biggest difference to me between mental health and brain health is a proactive versus a reactive approach. And so I think a lot of times with mental health, people are not seeking help or, paying attention to their brain until something goes wrong. And whereas brain health is like, what can I be doing today to stay healthy? Similar to heart health or physical health, we know the things to do for the brain. We're still kind of on the frontier of discovering really what those things are. And so that's a lot of what I want to share with you today, are what are things people can be doing to be proactive. And then I'll also add, just with mental health and kind of waiting until it gets to that point, that I think people just, yes, they either aren't aware or don't know. And then there's so much stigma there too, that then prevents people from getting the help that they need. So I think brain health is almost just a more public health ready term that can make people feel empowered to know they can do something about it instead of feeling ashamed. There's so much shame around our brain, actually, and just being afraid of being judged, or they're going to think I'm stupid, or they're going to think I'm crazy, or something's wrong with me. And really, that our brain is so deeply tied and connected to just who we are as a person. And so to feel empowered of like, I'm actually in control of this. This isn't something that I just, it's like this black box, like I can't see it, I don't know. And so that can be really scary. So I think just giving people the vocabulary to understand, this is the brain is not separate from the body. It's so interconnected, and to just start to equip people.
Excellent. I think, that's an excellent way of, explaining it. And I guess, like, the takeaway message for me, for example, is that, mental health and brain health pretty much are the same, right? And it's just that one needs to really shift your focus from mental health, which tends to get stigmatized and people feel ashamed, and then look at it as brain, like any organ, any part of your body, and it's just a part of your body that may be functioning well or that may be dysfunctioning, and you can go and ask for help and seek treatments the way you seek treatments for any other problem, right? So, Dr. Julie, in your work, you just talked about proactive versus reactive approaches. Do you want to put some light and more sort of clarity on what those approaches are?
Sure. So these are things that are not groundbreaking by any means. They're a lot of the things that are helpful to be proactive about your physical health, like for your heart, are also going to be good for the brain. So this is the basics, and I call this the essential five. And the five are: it's sleep, it's eating, getting proper nutrition, exercise, movement, social support, strong social connections, and then managing stress. And those all interplay with each other. But I say those are the basic five. And without those five really foundational things, there are not without those, you can't have a healthy brain if you don't have those fundamentals. So I think really it's thinking about how can I set myself up for success rather than just accept decline and I think the other difficult thing with that is that a lot of people, they're like, give me a quick fix, or just tell me what's the magic bullet, or let me just play this brain game for 10 minutes a day. And it's like, it's a lifestyle. It has to be a lifestyle. You have to really, it's a lifelong process. It's never just like, okay, I got it, I'm healthy now, I can stop doing things. It's like, it's continuous. And so just as our lives change and we go through different seasons and we have different responsibilities or, our passions or what we need to use our brain for, that changes throughout the lifespan. And so just paying attention to that. But there are these core, 5 essential things that you need consistently throughout that. And so I can dive more into talk a little bit more about each of those. And so I would say when it comes to sleep, this is the most underrated brain tool that we have. Sleep is so powerful. And even just, there's studies that have shown they got people to sleep for just 1 week. I think they slept like 1 or 2 hours more just in 1 week. And then immediately tested them, and they performed better on measures of attention. When there was distraction, they performed better on, new learning. The research is incredible when it comes to that. So nearly 80% of mental health issues, 80% of those people have some form of insomnia. So there's an important relationship there between getting enough sleep, getting good quality sleep, and mental health issues. So I think that's something just important that's really overlooked. And so we also, with sleep, we have to think about how our bodies are wired, and circadian rhythms is a huge part of that you get. Your suprachiasmatic nucleus is your master body clock, and it's dictating really what happens to happen at the right time in your body. And so all of these systems are so complex and interconnected, but what's really amazing is that we are governed by being awake when it's light out and being asleep when it's dark out. And as we have moved into more modern technology, which is a good thing, we have lights on all night long. So you are no longer sleeping when it's dark out or even being awake when it's light out, that we've kind of shifted away from that. And so that wreaks havoc on our systems. And I also want to say that when it comes to the reason I start with sleep is because there's a balance between sleep and wakefulness, or restfulness and alertness. And so that's getting into the nervous system. That's your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. And so there's just this constant cycling of fluctuating back and forth between the two and having a balance. And so the quality of when you are asleep is going to affect the quality of when you are awake and using your brain and needing it to think and reason and come up with solutions and all that. So, and have clarity and be, not moody, or to show up and do the things you need to do. So I just want to say sleep is essential, and having consistently going to bed at the same time every day and waking up at the same time, not sleeping way in on weekends or holidays. A good indication to know if you are getting enough sleep or not is if you have to use an alarm clock, or if you really oversleep on holidays, or if you crave caffeinated and sugar-rich drinks, or you're dependent on caffeine. If you notice that you're more impulsive or just lack of empathy, those are all signs that you're not getting enough sleep. And so what's nice is you kind of have to, it's a lot of awareness and mindfulness of paying attention to your own body, your own mood, and noticing, okay, wow, I'm really irritable. It's wow, like I actually didn't get enough sleep last night. So there's a connection there, and there's something I can do about it. I can go to bed earlier tonight, or I can, prioritize my sleep. And I think prioritizing a nightly wind down routine, is a big thing that we're plugged in, we're go all day long. We're on our phones till late, and there's a lot of stuff about light, and I wouldn't worry so much about the blue light from the devices. I would more so worry about the content you're consuming. So if you're on social media, if you're checking your email, if you're doing work, those things are stimulating to the sympathetic nervous system and to, emotional systems, and that's going to keep you awake. So it's going to be harder to fall asleep and get good quality sleep. So I think just paying attention to that, and if you can be off of your devices like an hour before bed, if you can read or journal, take a bath, meditate, figure out your routine. It's different for everybody. So that's the other thing when it comes to brain health advice, is like, you have to do the work to figure out what's going to work well for you. I can't give you a one size fits all. I can give you recommendations and share things that have worked well for me or other people, but you have to just try it out. And so I start with sleep.
Sorry, just to interject you, when I was listening to you, and I'm just so glad that you brought it up as a number one tip, and that you, put so much focus on sleep. And you mentioned that we have, as human beings, become nocturnal, whereas we are beings, right? And we're not naturally designed to be nocturnal beings. We have kind of sort of shifted our natural biorhythm. And of course, that has an impact. And I can relate it very well, because I'm somebody who has struggled with sleep. This is one of the things that we brought up when we were discussing COVID with one of our guests. And I was asking him about tips regarding insomnia, which I developed after COVID. And, everything that you were saying, from being irritable, from being not able to pay it as much attention, from your focus deteriorating, from the fog, everything makes sense. And then I came across this really, really amazing TED talk the other day by Matt Walker. And it was, I don't know if you've seen it, it said, sleep is your superpower. And when I watched it, I really, it blew me off. Like the way everything that you said, it was literally the same thing. And he was telling, because you're a scientist, so of course, you know the changes that lack of sleep does to your brain. Now, I want you to, you have highlighted a lot about the importance of sleep, but I do want you to kind of dive into how your brain reacts structurally and chemically if someone is sleep deprived.
Mm-hmm.
Because, in that talk, he talked about it, and it really kind of, I became upset, because I was like, oh gosh, I don't want that happening to my brain.
Can I add my 2 cents over here? Because insomnia is something that I also experienced lately. And I guess everyone experiences insomnia at some point in time. So whatever you guys are discussing resonates with me solely. So kindly shed some light on it. So, yeah.
And there can be so many reasons for that. And when we get into other lifestyle factors, like, your nutrition, what time you're eating, your exercise, your stress levels, and social support, that those are all going to affect your sleep. So we'll get more into that as well. But in terms of physiologically, what is happening in the brain and what are the benefits of sleep, or what's going on there. So sleep is a whole brain event. Every single neurotransmitter system, it cleans out the toxins that build up during the day. I also want to say Matt Walker wrote a book called Why We Sleep. That is a fantastic resource for anyone that wants to dive deeper into that. And so I imagine his TED Talk would be wonderful. I haven't seen it.
Thanks for mentioning it. Nisha, do put a link down there. She mentioned it.
Yeah.
Because, yes, so, I think our viewers would be interested, because you see a lot of people do not look at mental health from a scientific view. Even when you talk about it, people who are not in the scientific field, or not doctors, even who are, they are not diving, or they don't have a good picture of what it is that goes on in your brain. Actually, why is it sleep so important? So I want you to kind of just briefly, or in whatever capacity, you can tell me and our viewers what happens in the brain.
Yes. So like I mentioned, it is clearing out toxins that build up during the day. And then every single body system and brain system is resetting and repairing. So it's like, you have to think of it like, what's a good analogy for this? Essentially just that it's the reset button, where it's not only clearing out everything, but so memory consolidation occurs. This is where new learning is processed. And this is the time for that to happen, and it can't happen any other time. And then there is also studies that show something called sleep debt. So for example, you stay up all night, you pull an all-nighter studying or being out having fun, and then the next day you're like, dead, exhausted, and you sleep way in the next day. There's one of the first studies recently came out to show that it doesn't make up for it. That debt, like just sleeping in more the next day, doesn't actually compensate for the missed sleep the night before. Now, we're all going to have, so yes. And I think to the point, to Misha's point about we're all going to experience a sleepless night or have, poor sleep one night and what's going on there. This is where you have to do a little detective work and think about, okay, typically stress and anxiety are going to really affect sleep. And so if you wait, like I said, if it builds up all day long and then you are trying to go to sleep, you're not going to be able to relax and get into your parasympathetic system to really calm down. So it's all about managing stress throughout the day and taking short little breaks or doing things to keep in check with that, rather than letting it accumulate and then expect to be able to just shut it off. It's like, that's not going to work. It's not going to happen. In terms of other processes, so there's an interesting study, and I will kind of just illustrate what the graph looks like, but it shows cognitive performance across the 24 hours of the day. And it shows how in the wee hours of the morning, like from 2 to 6 a.m., that cognitive performance is worse than if you were legally drunk. That literally that our systems are not set up to be awake at that time. That's again, tapping into circadian rhythms and being in sync with this. So this is why, when people take road trips or they're like, we're just going to drive straight through the night. And I'm like, that is one of the most dangerous things you could do. Or as a resident, a lot of doctors are night, or nurses are night shift or while they're in medical school, and it's really dangerous actually, because it's worse than if you were drunk. And so that just all of those cognitive functions are impaired because the brain is not wired to be awake at those times, which is just
so imagine and this is something you see in college students who pull all-nighters, right? And so this is something that I think needs to be addressed, right? Because you have there's this culture of pulling all-nighters. Oh, we have an exam, we have an assignment, there's a test, just pull an all-nighter. And then you have people who consume like all these energy drinks like Red Bull, various kinds. And I mean, they themselves, I'm sure, have their own effect, right? Like you said, I mean, that's a very, very
Dr. Sana, sorry to add, you can't get you high, because when I drink Coke or I drink energy drink at night, I can't sleep and I'm acting high like I'm on some kind of a marinara or something. So can you explain that?
Yeah, so you definitely want to avoid caffeine later in the day, right? So try to keep that to the morning hours, because yes, it's going to stimulate. Caffeine stimulates the sympathetic nervous system, and so that's for any listeners who maybe aren't familiar with parasympathetic or sympathetic. Those names can be really confusing, but parasympathetic, think rest. Sympathetic, think alert, or also referred to as fight or flight a lot, or that stress response. But really it's about being alertness, because when you wake up in the morning, you want the sympathetic response. You need a rise in cortisol to be awake and alert and start your day. And then at night, you want to balance that out or have more parasympathetic to be the rest and calm, and so you can wind down. So yeah, definitely avoiding really sugary or caffeinated drinks later in the day, or really anything later, probably beyond noon or 2 p.m. And then also a note on food. So what's really interesting is that our brain, so our eyes take in light, and that directly goes to your suprachiasmatic nucleus, or is processed there, and that's what keeps these cycles kind of in check. Now, when food is present in the system, food actually takes priority over the light. So if you're eating late in the day, that's telling your body to be awake, even if it's dark out. And so where this ties in, if you think about our ancestors, when it was light out, that's when you could hunt for food or find food. And when it was dark, you couldn't, because you couldn't see anything, and so you wouldn't be eating at that time. Now that it's light out and we have food available 24/7, we're eating, and those two systems are in conflict, because the light system's like, hey, wait a second. And then the food in the stomach is like, no, I'm, in charge. And so basically, that conflict.
Dr. Julie, I was reading the other day, there was a research that we have a brain in our gut. So is it true that we have a brain in our gut that doesn't require quite enough we eat at night? So can you shed some light, as you're the expert?
Sure. So there is a connect. So there's a gut-brain connection. Your vagus nerve is really connecting what's going on in your gut to communicate to your brain, and then the other way around. The other interesting thing is that our food, as we break that down, that becomes the amino acids that make up our neurotransmitters. So your dopamine, your serotonin, your norepinephrine, those amino acid chains create these chemical messengers that help dictate what's happening. So that's why the quality of our food matters, because think of your food as little instruction packets, or, that's directly going to be absorbed by the body and turn into your neurotransmitters in your brain. But also that it's going to affect your mood, because those neurotransmitters directly, dopamine is your feel good, or serotonin is feeling satisfied, that without proper kind of alignment there. The other, there's a lot with the microbiome, and really interesting studies on, people just linking a less healthy microbiome with things like depression, and then doing really crazy studies where they'll do like a fecal transplant, and they give someone some gut bacteria from someone who's not depressed, and then it helps the depression, just by having a better mix of or a healthier microbiome. So really fascinating stuff there. I would say some tips. So we're getting kind of into nutrition now, and then I want to circle back, because I know Dr. Hafsa, you have a question, so hopefully you still have it. But for a diverse microbiome, I know there's a lot of different information around probiotics and prebiotics, and what supplements do I take? My best advice, one, I think always working with a functional medicine doctor that can actually do tests to know, do you have leaky gut? Do you have food sensitivities? Because you could be eating all of the quote right foods or healthy, nutritious foods, but if your gut has issues and you can't absorb it, then you're not going to get the benefit of that. So I recommend for everyone to look into that. But that eating a diverse diet, so variety of foods, eating what's in season, and then eating fermented foods is great. So things like yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, kombucha, those are all going to be helpful for digestion.
Unfortunately, kombucha and kimchi are not very available in our part of the country.
Okay.
Oh my God, when you said it, like I'm just like so tempted to kind of just,
I want to try it. It sounds alien to me. What is like you just brought taste in my mouth. My salivary glands are always already salivating. So
I actually
my brain is active now.
I've made my own kimchi before. It's actually easy. There's recipes online, and it's just, you need cabbage and like some vinegar, and you just let it ferment in the fridge. And
like an Oriental recipe, right?
Say that again.
It's an Oriental recipe, right?
Yeah, it's typically like Korean, I think.
Korean. So like, yeah. I remember having kimchi at this Korean restaurant somewhere. Yeah. But that's completely deviating us from the topic. But while you're at it, and I have done my research, bit of research into it as well, because we've all been very fascinated with, I came across lots of researches and lots of articles that actually talked about a brain boosting diet. And I'm very sort of fascinated with it, and I'm constantly researching on it. And I even mentioned it in one of my blogs on the Norn way when I wrote about mental health. That we need to focus on brain boosting diet. But of course, like a lot of people do not know what it is, right? Like you have to research on it, or you need an expert. So like, just do dive into that. Like, what are the brain boosting diets that one can, and they don't have to be something very what's the word? They don't have to be exotic, or for example, the things that you mentioned. But I could give you an example of like, they had mentioned nuts, right? They had mentioned salmon. So like, do dive into like the generic, like things that everybody can consume as a brain boosting diet. Because I believe that brain boosting diet is different from a routine diet, right?
Yeah. So, Dr. Hafsa, do you want to ask your question? I don't want to get too far on, and then I'll answer.
Sorry, Thank you. Go ahead. First, let's Dr. Hafsa ask your question, and then you can ask your mom.
I might have to go back on what we said, though. I mean, we're delving into nutrition now, but that you had everything to say about sleep. There's this particular notion within people commonly now that somebody can be a night person or somebody can be a morning person altogether. And I personally, I find it very contradictory. I feel like a human brain, as you said, is pretty much wired for that particular circadian rhythm that there is. And we're kind of putting our systems in conflict over there. However, there's this particular notion, and a lot of people back it up by research as well, that, somebody can be, outperforming themselves at night, or, somebody is much of a morning person. Do you think there is a difference there, or it's something that people are just battling against?
No, there absolutely is. It's called a chronotype, and there's a quiz you can take online. I can put it in the chat in a second, but basically there's 4 different types actually. So they named them after different animals. So you have your early one, which is a lion. Your kind of regular in sync with the sun is a bear. Your night owl person they call that a wolf. And then the ones that are really light sleepers and have a lot of trouble with that are called dolphins. And anyway, so there's a whole thing on it, but it's fascinating. And I'm really glad you brought up this point, because research has shown that there are several different, you can have a different circadian rhythm from, your family or your partner or whoever. All 4 of us may have a different one. So knowing your individual peak time. So for me, I'm a morning type. So I know that if I need to give a presentation, or if I need to really think and concentrate and write something, I need to block my morning hours to do that. And then by the time it's afternoon, like, don't ask me to do any really deeper thinking, because it's much harder. And so knowing your own cycle really makes a big difference. And so there's some good science to support different performance. And that's not just cognitive, but that's also athletic performance. They've done studies with athletes looking at asking them to, swim or do their run, timed at different times during the day, and seeing which time there's better performance. So yes, that's really important. And then feeding back, so this will tie us back into the nutrition part, but when to eat, because as things fluctuate, like your levels of melatonin, your levels, these different hormones for sleep and wake, that affects your metabolism and how you digest food and use it. So all these systems, if you just think about food and sleep and movement as different forms of energy, really how to optimize those. The more energy you have, the better your brain's going to function, and the healthier it will be. So, yes. So, okay. Circling back to the question that we were on before that, which was about a brain boosting diet. And so I think this is really fascinating. And I want to just say, I just want people to not, there is no, this is the brain boosting diet. Because like I said, everybody's different. Everyone's microbiome's different. Everyone's sleep circadian rhythm's a little different. You know, there are broad categories maybe, but you really have to figure out what works for you. And so again, this brings in mindfulness or awareness or intuitive eating. You have to know, okay, you know, Misha, your point about like, when I drink this, I feel, you know, it makes me feel this certain way. Or like when I eat like for me, when I would have gluten or dairy, like I would have a stomach ache or I would have brain fog or it'd be hard to concentrate. So like noticing, okay, I ate that. And then do I feel sluggish and like, I just want to lay on the couch and take a nap? Or do I feel energized and, you know, thinking clearly and ready to tackle the things I need to do today? So it's a lot of, you know, like I said, one, working with a functional medicine doctor to make sure your gut is healthy, to even get those nutrients, but then two, figuring out what works for you. And so I know that there's so much information when it comes to vegan, paleo, keto, you know, all these different diets. There's the Mind diet, there's the Mediterranean diet. I know there's been a lot of research around those two specifically for brain health. And I think there's good things in them. But what I would say across the board is going to be healthier is avoiding processed foods. I can't reiterate that enough. If you can't pronounce the ingredients or you don't know what they are, you want to eat real food. So something that you can pick from the ground, pull off of a tree, or shoot it, or, you know, catch it, is like, those are going to be the most, because the combination of the way that, like, for example, natural sugars that are in like fruit or honey, that those fructose was meant to be combined with other things. So like the things that are in fruit, like there's phytonutrients, there's different, you know, these different, it's combined with glucose that there's, whereas when it's taken out of that in something like high fructose corn syrup, that actually is really destructive to our brain specifically. So a lot of processed sugar and a lot of high fructose corn syrup actually shrinks your neurons in your hippocampus. So for anyone listening that's not familiar, your hippocampus is the center of the brain for learning and forming memories. So the dendrites actually shrink. So this is literally, it's one of those things where you're like, once you know that, you're like, I don't want my dendrites to shrink. I need my hippocampus to function. So it's going to affect your short-term memory, your long-term memory, your...
Dr. Julie, since you're talking about avoiding processed food, since we both are speech language therapists and we're in the field, so eating processed food is also related with the ASD and neuropsychiatric diseases and the ADHDs that our children are having these days. So can you shed light on that parents are, like moms are consuming processed foods. So research states that is the root cause of it, but still it's not proof. And also I've read this research on epigenetic inheritance. So by Dr. Ali Javed. So he just also mentioned that what we eat, we become. So can you just shed light on that as well?
Yeah, that's so important. I mean, truly.
Question. That is something I think, because for parents these days, I just feel like they're not very aware of the healthy choices with their children.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that would be a great question to answer.
It's really, it's nowadays it's, well, one, it's education. So it's not knowing any better, but then two, it's like what's available, what is cheap and convenient and on the shelves or being advertised to you as healthy when it's actually not. So I think that there's a lot that the food industry plays a big part in that. But I think individually for us to know, a lot of behavioral issues with children, it's like, it's food sensitivity. Like, you know, that like your mood and you're going to be irritable and like fussy if you don't feel good, and they have no way to know what that's, as a child can't know, but as a parent to pay attention to those things. And so I think allergy testing is huge. I think that can, you know, like I said, with that gut brain connection, if things are not right in your gut, then you're selling your brain short on giving it the tools that it needs or the building blocks for those neurotransmitters and for everything to function well. So I think that there is, I mean, you know, the theme I keep coming back to is just how related everything is. And so it's like really a lot of issues. And I love that you brought up epigenetics, because it's one of my, I think, the most hopeful messages that we can give people
Exactly, because now I'm seeing patients on a daily basis, and this is the kind of a problem that every mother faces. So it's just like it's coming from within that, please, because most of I told my patients to watch this, my clients to watch this podcast, because since the expert is coming, so coming from an expert create a different kind of an impact. So continue.
Yeah. So really, like I said, getting back to what was available to our ancestors is what our body, like we're made to be in tune with the earth. And so eating what's in season. So for example, things like fruit or honey, those were only available seasonally. Nowadays, we ship stuff in from across the world so we can have pineapple year round or what, it's like, but typically it was only available seasonally and in small quantities. Now it's like we have bags of sugar, candy, and just, what I mean, laying around, and it's not meant, our bodies weren't meant to consume that and, process that. So it's not surprising, but I think really, again, going back to eating foods that are grown locally, that's going to have nutrients and things, or having, local honey that helps your allergies. It's things that, because you're being in sync with your environment and that's where you are in the world. Eating what's in season, that's going to help you, because it's going to help equip your body with what it needs to thrive and be healthy and have healthier immunity for that season of the year. We need different things in the winter than we do in the summer, right? So we're doing different activities. So it's like just eating what's local, organic, pesticides and chemicals are wreaking havoc on things. Being exposed to these types of toxins affect our hormone systems, affects your endocrine system, really. So avoiding buying organic when you can. And so, yeah, so I think it's things that people, to your point, don't realize the connection between those two. But really, and then the other thing is not eating all the time, which we talked about, but there's something that I want to introduce that's called time restricted eating. So this is not necessarily fasting, because fasting, I think, would imply some calorie restriction. Time restricted eating is paying attention to that circadian rhythm. And so, for example, when we eat, our cells in our stomach lining actually get damaged. And so overnight, in order to repair, if you have food in there, it can't repair them. So then again, causing more things. So anyway, so you want to not eat at like 2 hours before bed. So you want to stop eating 2 hours before bed. And then if you can eat all of your meals, ideally within a 10-hour window, so there's a lot about intermittent fasting. It's kind of the same idea of basically saying you can consume the same amount of foods you normally would just within this time frame. And so just being aware, like, am I eating and then also when you wake up, if you can wait at least an hour until you break your fast. And then waking up and getting morning sunlight. These are more tips for circadian rhythm, but it's overall everything. Getting morning sunlight is going to help reset that clock. And then and movement. So waking up, getting sun, taking a walk, doing some movement that's fasted, and then breaking your fast a little bit later into the day. Ideally, if you can wait until lunch, and then not eating 2 hours before bed. So that's going to help all those systems. And then
sorry to interject there, but this is really fascinating, because for example, usually what people do, and I'm the kind of person, like, I wake up and I need my breakfast right away. Like, I feel like and it's something probably that I've been conditioned, as a child, my mother, and I do believe breakfast is, we've been told it's the most important meal of the day. And even we mentioned, but when you just said that, you wake up and you don't eat, I think that's what you said, and just move around, get some sunshine. So what does that do for you? I mean, if you're not eating and you're moving around, like, is your body and is your mind being primed for a better metabolism?
I'm really glad you brought that up, because that is one of the biggest, I would say that's a myth. The breakfast is the most important meal of the day. I actually want to bust that myth. And that's something that came from the cereal companies that that have something to profit off of you buying their breakfast processed foods. So here's the deal with fasting. So I want to say try it and notice, because I know that there's a book. Okay, so there's a couple books I'm going to put in the chat. One of them is by Dr. Drew Ramsey. He's a psychiatrist, and he wrote a book called Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety. And that's a really good resource to know how specific foods are affecting mood and can improve your brain health. And then I don't know if you're familiar with Dave Asprey. He does a lot of biohacking stuff, but he wrote a book called Fast This Way. And that's about this fasting and really learning. He gets into a lot of the science behind that. But to your question of if you wake up and don't eat, so I also want you to think about our ancestors. When they would wake up, there wasn't going to be food just immediately available. They would wake up and then they would have to walk around and find it, or exercise, like move to hunt and get it. So it's you're doing fasted movement and then you eat. So you didn't just wake up and have food there. And so that's kind of like how we've evolved. And so so by doing that, you're giving yourself, one, getting the sunlight. You are stimulating your suprachiasmatic nucleus is then going to trigger and let the rest of your brain know, oh, it's daylight, it's time to be awake, and then set off the trigger of all these other body systems that need to prepare you for activity, for thinking, for moving. Like, it's just getting your body ready. And so I would say, experiment with it. And first, it's like, just if you're used to eating right away, it's like, okay, wait 10 minutes or wait 30 minutes, and, and just gradually see. But I think I've been pleasantly surprised at how some days I'll do like a 24-hour fast, like I'll from dinner one night to dinner the next night. And I actually think so much more clearly. Like, I'll do that. It would be ideal to do that like once a week. But essentially it's a reset, and it resets your microbiome as well. So that's really important. And then when you do break your fast, that the microbiome, it's a healthy process. So, and that's kind of how, so anyway, so just again, always getting back to our roots and just kind of these basic things of our biology and how we are wired is really fascinating. And I've seen just tremendous benefits from just more energy.
Yeah, I have heard about, the great benefits of intermittent fasting and how it really, really boosts your immune system. And it helps shed out and release toxins from your body. And when you bring up fasting, it's interesting because we, as Muslims, we were just fasting some time ago, and we do it for a month. So, and it's not easy, right? Like, we find, but because we do it every month, so I can relate to it. That yes, when you're eating less, and we're kind of eating on a program, on a curfew, like when you're going to be able to break the fast and when you have to stop eating. I do find that during the day you do think clearly, and that overeating, mindfulness, clarity, rejuvenation. I found this time that because that's the only time that I fasted, so I can only talk about that. I haven't really been wanting to, and after your talk, I will definitely try intermittent fasting because I've been reading up and I've been very fascinated with it. But I did find that and when suddenly when that was over and I came back to the routine of like eating and stuff, when you stuff yourself, you do feel sluggish and you do feel foggy, and you, for some reason, you think I'm going to eat and I'll feel energized, but actually it's the opposite. You actually feel sometimes quite sleepy. It's many times it's happened that even my kids, for example, after certain meals, they go like, "Whoa, we're sleeping. Why am I feeling sleepy?" And so there is a connection with. I mean, is there a connection with like the amount of food you're supposed to consume as well?
Yes, definitely. I think overeating, and so this all goes into mindful eating again, but when we eat too much or when we eat too quickly, or if we eat when we're stressed, or if we're eating in the car, or, all these circumstances are going to affect your ability to digest. And that is because you need to be kind of relaxed, right, when you're doing that in order for digestion to occur. Because when you're stressed, your blood is going to your muscles to prepare for movement and action instead of going towards your digestive system to help process, metabolize and absorb that food. So it definitely, the amount that we eat is important. And I think it's also, it's that mindful eating of like, you stop when you're full, and so knowing what that is. And I know I'm guilty of it too, for sure. Sometimes I'm just so hungry, or, certain holidays or whatever. And it's like, you just gorge and it's like, you don't feel well. But I also think, I love that you brought up that you guys fast as a regular part of really like culture and life and religion. And I think that if you look across the board, almost every form of spirituality has their own form of fasting in some way. And so that they've figured out that that is an important part to being healthy as a whole person. So I really like that you brought that up.
Okay, thank you. And that's great. So now we can move over to exercise, because I know that is something that, there is a whole fad about exercise, body image today in the world, the digitalized world, the imagery, everybody wants to exercise. And if not exercise, everybody wants to find some hack to have the six pack, to look fabulous. But I find like people are not really vested in the benefits of exercise. It's more about the body image. So do dive into the importance of exercise, and because a lot of people expect that, oh, if I'll go to the gym for a month, I'll get that body and then I can just leave it. But I'm sure that you want to talk about consistency and the actual physiological benefits of exercise.
Yes. So exercise, number one, like I mentioned at the beginning, it's a lifestyle, right? It's to your point. You can't just go for a month and then, or get your summer bod. It's just like, it's really about, it's holistic. It's about loving yourself, being who you are. But I will say exercise across what's in the neuroscience research, exercise is one of the number one most protective factors when it comes to healthy brain aging, specifically memory. So there's some really interesting links with exercise and hippocampal function, which again is our memory and new learning center. So if you do none of these tips, but you maintain physical activity, throughout your life or into late in life, that's literally one of the best things you can do. So just to reiterate, the brain benefits of movement this is what when we're talking about being proactive, this is what it is. This is building in those daily healthy habits. So then when you are older, you're not just like, decline the whole time. It's like you're building that so that you can either maintain or why not improve, right? It's like you don't have to just accept. I think the fact that our society has largely accepted like, oh, I'm just going to get older and my brain will stop working, or I'll get older and get dementia. And it's like, that does not need to be the story, and nor should anyone accept it, especially with
Dr. Julie, can I add over here, Dr. Wayne, as the psychologist, he just said that what's wrong with you, and he just said like change your diet and change your activities, and his cancer was reversed just because he changed his mindset. And I love what you're saying, that because I practice growth mindset, and that's how we are what we are, and that's how what we do it. So nice point. I love it.
There is so much synergy here. We talk about growth mindset all the time. I think this is fascinating. I learned this recently, and this is why let me tell you about this science, and it's going to change.
You see the passion that is in your eyes, because I can resonate with you.
So our cells, our individual cells, this is work by Bruce Lipton. He wrote a book called Biology of Belief, if anyone wants to check it out. But our individual cells turn on and off based on their environment, right? This is epigenetics. But what's interesting is so when you take them in a petri dish, like a stem cell, depending on the environment it's in, like the solution or the blood, that's what triggers that cell to turn into an organ or bone or muscle, right? Like it's just a stem cell. It can turn into anything it wants. But based on the environment it's in is what will trigger it to turn into that thing. Okay, so if you think about all of our cells, the environment they live in is our blood. Okay,
wow.
The brain is the chemist. Your brain sets the environment of your blood, of what chemicals are in your blood. And then what sets the brain chemist is the image in your mind. So whether it's growth mindset, whether it's an image of love and safety, or an image of fear, that's going to change. Your brain chemistry will change to match that image, and will change what's in your blood, and then will change how your cells react and change. And that will trigger disease or health. So mindset is huge, because the image you have in your head is what your your brain will then match, and your body and your chemistry then yeah.
I will even want to further to say that it brings disease. I mean, negative mindset and a depressive and negative mindset can cause illnesses, disease, depression, anxiety. But I want to go further and say that like you said, there are actually physiological biochemical changes that happen with the way that you think, because your mind perhaps sends signals to your body, and then we are we are human beings. We're filled with different kind of all sorts of cells and chemicals and enzymes, and I think it impacts your behavior. So if you have a negative mindset, you will actually behave in a certain way, and you will attract that outcome as well. That is why they say that if you are visualizing something positive, you attract it because you kind of mirror it. So that, I mean, I absolutely agree, and I'm really glad that we brought that point up.
Yeah, that's huge. Okay, so I know we're getting to the end of our time. I want to touch on the importance of social support.
Yes.
Social support is critical. We all experience the detrimental effects of the pandemic and being isolated or just having less social interaction than we used to. And I just want to share a few quick facts about the benefits of experiencing, healthy, positive social support and connections. Leads to less cardiovascular reactivity. It boosts your immune system, so increases things like T cells and natural killer cells that fight cancer. It is tied to increased longevity, so living longer. It's tied to better sleep and less depression and anxiety and less cognitive decline. So when you look at areas of the world, called blue zones, where people live well into their hundreds and they're very healthy and active, it's because there's community. There's multi-generations living together. You're not isolated, and there is a
Even I read that research. And I was so happy because my mom was going through cardiac arrest, and then I convinced my father, let's just take her to her mom so that she feels happy, because I read that research that when you're a heart patient, you need to spend more time with your family members, and then it increases longevity and gets you back there. You can continue. You're the better.
I love that example. I love that you did that, because it's true. We need, our heart truly is both physically and emotionally and spiritually that center of love. And so when we're hurting in that way, it actually plays out in physical ailments. So I
also apply my researches with Dr. Sana and Dr. Hafsa, because when I feel low, sometimes they are the support, because that's the social connection, and that's what we feel. So you can add that.
Yeah, and I think we need each other. We are social creatures, and we are wired for that connection, and so it's so important. And I know that everyone has seen the importance of that, but also to really make time for it. I think when we get really busy or stressed, that those social things are the first thing to go, or we don't have time to call our mom or get coffee with a friend. But to really prioritize that as part of brain health, I think people don't realize that is something. And then the last one, we did touch a lot on managing stress, and so getting enough sleep and exercising is going to be huge for that. But also, of course, meditating, breathing exercises, getting sleep, talking to a friend, that's going to manage.
That's what they both preach, because that's what our podcasts are about, because you are totally resonating with our platform. So continue.
Yeah, no, I mean, really just that's all of these things are so related and interconnected. And so these essentials are how to be proactive and build a healthy brain, and to continue that for a long life. And I think, we sort of forget about our brain. We forget that it's just automatically doing all these things for us. And so knowing that these are not hard things. These are just things that require a little bit of paying attention and change. And a lot of people don't want to change their lifestyle. But for those that do, you can. And so I think just knowing that, hey, we talked about a lot of different tips today of things you can try. And it's a journey. It's a journey of really self-discovery and exploration of like, this is what works for me and this is what doesn't, and doing more of the things that work well for you. And knowing that we're all human. And so there's no 100% gold star of anything, but it's always a process. It's in process.
That's great. That's excellent. And, we have covered some really, really amazing points here. And thank you, Dr. Julie, for sharing all your amazing insights and tips. And it was really lovely to have you because, you talked about a lot of things that we, as a Norway, are very passionate about. And we constantly want to be, finding out more and more from our different experts.
It was
So
very
just
well aligned with what we do.
talked about. Dr. Hafsa, you can just quickly recap everything that she talked about, and then we can sign off.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Julie, for everything. I mean, it was so well aligned with what we've been trying to communicate here. And it definitely added a lot more to what we could perhaps do. I'm going to take back the note about processed foods because food's a weakness for me, and I really have to go about it a little more mindfully here. Uh, it was amazing how you discussed the importance of sleep, and it moved on to how different people need to align themselves with nature perhaps a little more in order to see what works out for them, what doesn't work out for them. We discovered the importance of having a functional doctor who understands what your gut is, what would work for you, what wouldn't, along with you, in order to help you make the most of all the brain boosting diets that you just mentioned as well. We also took a look into to how exercise is very much important for your brain, and how the system of belief works into all of this and makes us, a lot more healthier. And this encompasses brain health. Would you like to add something to that, or leave our viewers with an end note?
No, I think that really just want to encourage everyone to know that you are in control of your own brain, that you are not, a victim of the genes you inherit or anything like that, but that I just want anyone listening to know that to just be empowered, to just start small. It can seem overwhelming, but just pick one tip and try it today or tomorrow. And it's just these little steps, these little things that are actually big things, and they add up to building a healthy brain over time. So I think just to not be afraid of the brain, but to really become curious and learn. And obviously you are curious and learning if you're listening to something like this. So way to go. You're already ahead of the curve. And just want to thank you all for having me, and to just share that if anyone has questions for me, you can find me at Dr. Julie Fratantoni is my Instagram, and I'm always sharing brain science and brain tips, and love to get to share my knowledge and help people build a healthier brain. So thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. Misha, you can put her Instagram link down. And
I will just put it in the chat box in the comment section so that everyone can reach out in the real time. So when they watch it again as a rewind. So on the YouTube and on Facebook. So thank you so much, Dr. Julie. And I have so many questions, but I will just stop over here and we can have a private Zoom session some other time.
Absolutely. We're restricted for time, but thank you for giving us your time, sharing your expertise, your knowledge, all the great insight that you had into brain health. We truly enjoyed our conversation with you. Have a great rest of the day and all the best to you. We hope to keep in touch with you.
Bye-bye. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So bye, everyone. We are signing off.
Bye.